Hello, welcome to today's panel. It's the final session before we all break for lunch today. Hope you've been enjoying conference so far. Today's session is all about the intersection of AI and Web3. And we've heard over the last couple of days the amazing ways in which artificial intelligence empowers us to do more, to be more impactful with our ministries. But we also want to talk about how these important technology paradigms come together. And when we think about Web3, we think of how AI empowers us to be more impactful in our ministries. But the whole paradigm of Web3 is so anchored in the aspects of power itself. How do we enable more people to be involved in what we do? How do we shift ownership and control of programs from centralized entities to decentralized ones? And what are the implications for how these two incredible, powerful technology paradigms can come together in the future? We want to explore that together today with our expert panel. I'm going to introduce them very briefly to you. We have John Cobb, who is the VP of Strategic Initiatives for Ligonier Ministries. We have Mike Finzel, who is the VP of Digital Innovation at Biblica. We have John Kim, who is a technologist based in the Bay Area, serving multiple missional enterprises, including as co-founder of CW3, that's Christians in Web3, Collective Impact Labs, and 100-fold. And we have John Knox, also co-founder of CW3, and recently joined the Gloo AI team in customer success in enterprise AI. Welcome to the panel. You're going to hear some amazing insights from each of these guys today. I want to start with John Cobb. Tell us about how you are seeing the interplay of AI and Web3, particularly in terms of how Web3 technologies empower innovation in this next era for Ligonier.
Yeah, a lot to unpack there. Can you hear me okay? Okay, great. So let me start with blockchain, which isn't necessarily a part of Web3, but it's a key element in terms of provable ownership and immutable data. So the invention of blockchain provided a really great tool for immutability of data, which was really helpful for finance, which is dominating the conversation. But it's also really interesting for content. If you can publish content in a way that's immutable, including from yourself, that unleashes a lot of powerful tools for censorship protection, to distribute content. And so one of the ways that I describe this would be an organization's statement of faith. And so it helps protect the theological fidelity of an organization. If you believe your statement of faith today and your founding principles, you publish your statement of faith in an immutable way, online or on-chain. And so if you have a leadership change within the organization and they want to take the organization in a different direction, the first thing they would do is update the statement of faith today, edit it online, but the donor doesn't get notified. As the donor sees a shift in the organization theologically or some sort of drift from the founding principles. So they would go online, they would see something different theology coming from an organization, and they don't know what changed with the statement of faith. And so they didn't print it out. The organization didn't print it and mail it to them. And so with blockchain, the difference is that the organization publishes that on chain, and it's a provable, immutable record of that statement. And so you can apply that to all content, which is
And let me ask this. So in your mind, why is having an immutable record more important, or why is that more significant in the era of AI than perhaps previous times?
So the difficulty today with AI, you can create any content easily, and it's believable. So you've seen this with the dawn of ChatGPT 3, which was a conversational AI, and images and video. And so the challenge is you can't actually prove what's false. You can't prove that somebody created something. And so bad actors, those that want to misinform, those that want to take people down, can create all sorts of content. And so an immutable ledger, if you publish content in a way, and so one of the ways to unpack this is a phrase that I've been working on, but called triplicate publishing. And so all publishers, Bible publishers, Ligonier included, parachurch, churches. If you publish in 3 ways, so print, traditional print, digital today, so social media, Facebook, YouTube, you publish in a digital way, and then you publish on-chain in a immutable record. Those serves as immutable bookends for the digital content. So if you think the future of the world's consumption of content is digital, the digital layer, you don't know what's true. And so print, you can refer to print, but the world doesn't have the print available, around the world.
Yeah.
But blockchain, because it's distributed globally, allows for the digital to be validated. So if AI knows what the trusted ledger is from an organization, or even like a political candidate, it can be an instant fact checker to know this new content that appeared online from R.C. Sproul or another teacher. You're like, well, this isn't on the trusted ledger from this organization, so it might not be trusted. And so yeah.
That's really good. You've established this principle of trust that Web3 in unique ways provides opportunities to provide for. You also talked about distribution and publishing, something that the guys at Biblica are really well grounded in. So I want to throw to Mark. Can you share a little bit about how you're using blockchain technology to augment publishing and distribution of the Bible?
Yeah, so we've talked a lot in the past few years, how do we leverage Web3 blockchain for the Bible? And we got a few years ago into talking maybe about NFTs, but that didn't really go anywhere. And at a very practical level, I'm going to be super practical here. I think some of these guys are much smarter than me in terms of Web3 theory and all those things. But we were looking at how do we practically get God's word into people's hands, leveraging blockchain technology, especially you were mentioning censorship earlier, places that are censored where you can leverage decentralization. And so we leveraged a blockchain called Arweave to put the Bible on the blockchain. And I actually would like to demo it for you guys. So we created this website called Lightwords. And the concept is essentially this is a website, but it lives on the blockchain. To a typical end user, it just looks like a normal website. They don't have to have wallets. They don't need to know anything about Web3 technology. They just access it like a normal website. But the cool thing is it's all hosted on the blockchain, so it has the benefits that John talked about, like immutability. We like to call it the unburnable Bible because it cannot be removed by any single entity. And we created this brand called Lightwords, which is kind of loosely connected to Bible. We also have another brand that is even kind of more obscure if you need to use it in context. But let me just kind of quickly walk through and do a bit of a live demo here. So we actually have 18 languages live on it right now. You can see the languages there. And you can also search for languages. You can search in English or your local language if you happen to know another language. And I'm going to click on the link here, which will take you, so that was a landing page. Now this is the actual Bible. And again, this is hosted on the blockchain. So not easy to block, not easy to remove. This is the Arabic Bible, Biblica's open Arabic translation. You can also play audio streaming from the blockchain. I don't have the audio hooked up here. You can navigate it like a normal website. And another really cool component about it, and this is unique to the Arweave blockchain, is when you click on the landing page, there's actually this long list of thousands of links. And what's really cool about it is that every single link goes to the same place. They all go to the Bible that you just saw, but they are all different. Some of them are really random and weird and obscure. They're essentially links that Arweave gateways create. But that makes it really difficult to block and censor because there's so many links that people can go to. And so that's kind of the idea of Bible on the blockchain, is that it makes it really simple for end users. Like I said, they don't need to be a technologist. They don't need to know anything about crypto wallets. They just have to have a browser on a phone. They can go to a website, and they can get to Scripture in a way that cannot be easily blocked or censored.
Yeah, that's amazing. What role do you see this kind of solution playing alongside the acceleration that we heard yesterday in terms of how AI is empowering Bible translation?
Yeah, I mean, I think when we talk about the last mile of getting God's word into people's hands, there are millions of people around the world who there's a translation that exists, but they can't get to it because the government censors, blocks content, they block apps, all kinds of different issues. And so we see this playing a key role in getting God's word into people's hands in those last mile areas where people can't get access to Scripture.
That's awesome. We heard this morning in Eric Soleria's talk a call for more openness, more collaboration amongst ministries that are sharing resources and data and all of these things. Web3 provides interesting opportunities to expand the arc of involvement, participation, and facilitate collaboration amongst networks. John, this is an area that you've been deeply involved in and supporting many ministries around the world. Talk us through some of the key areas that you think Web3 combined with AI can facilitate more of this sort of participation and collaboration work.
Sure, absolutely. Thank you. So I think as an illustration, one of the things that I'm working on behalf of an organization called Hundredfold Giving is we're building what we call a federated trusted kingdom data system. And so this is where organizations all have data. Everyone's collecting data, whether it's church engagement, church planting, digital evangelism, poverty alleviation, clean water, et cetera. Everyone is doing something that is going to provide some feedback mechanism to understand what's happening, whatever we're tracking, whatever metrics we're using, et cetera, to have some understanding of how well we're doing. And that's all data that's very useful to other people as well contextually. Unfortunately, much of that data is actually siloed right now. And so what we see is that one, because the data oftentimes is fragmented, they don't always understand even how to leverage their own data. But in addition to that, there's the opportunity to share that data as a contextual reference to other people who might be doing similar things or may not even understand the impact of what is happening in one place in one region can absolutely also have some influence upon the work that someone else is doing. And so with Web3, there are secure ways that we can actually help to facilitate decentralized infrastructures. I don't know how deep we want to go technically, but there are frameworks essentially that allow for secure ways to pipeline data in, and then to be able to make that data available to other people using different processes like decentralized identifiers and decentralized identity. And this is where AI comes into play too, which is to say, great, now if we actually have access to this data, and what we're saying with that decentralized infrastructure is that different people will have access to different types of data depending on how they've been qualified. And so if you're an organization that is doing similar types of work and you have been qualified to be a credible organization that can steward that data and steward that reputation well, then you should have access to that data to also empower what you're doing as well. But when it comes to AI, AI needs trustworthy data, right, to be able to really draw deep insights and analytics out of. And so that's where data provenance comes in, where these guys have been talking about, John and Mark have been talking about the immutability of data. How can we actually make sure that data is coming from a source and we understand where that data has potentially been modified or transformed to have an understanding of how to qualify and value that data. And so that data provenance is something that if we're able to provide the AI agents, which I think John is going to speak into, then we have discoverability and accessibility now to deeper insights that can be qualified and contextually relevant to the work that we're doing. And so the protections that we want to bring in here is also it's the security, but it's also the accessibility, discoverability of who else is doing what where that we may not even know exist. And there are concepts like zero-knowledge proofs that provide an added layer to say, if as a funder, I want to fund work that's being done in the Middle East, there might be organizations that are doing incredible work out there, but I don't know that they even exist because of the confidentiality that's required, the security, the privacy, to ensure there's physical protection. And so how might we actually find some of those entities, and how would they also be able to position themselves to share the work that they're doing with organizations that can resource them or people who want to also serve with them? And that's where zero-knowledge proofs essentially provide a mechanism where you can discover and access those relationships without revealing the full measure of identity or private information. And so think of something like a very basic example is if I'm trying to enter a house, then you know that I need a key. But if I can open the door and demonstrate that I've been able to enter the house, you don't necessarily have to see me use that key, right? You know implicitly that I have it. So it's a way to access certain data to qualify certain facts or information without necessarily revealing the entirety of it, right? So you're still protecting people, you're protecting the data that might, if it were exposed, provide some pathways for people to take bad actions. So we want to make sure that the data and the people behind that is absolutely preserved and secure. But we also want to make sure that there's more accessibility so that we can start to identify where there are gaps and also where there are people who can help fill those gaps, right? And so the collaborative element is first, we can share more of that data that's going to be helpful in informing and guiding better insights as to how we might reorient, recalibrate, reframe our efforts. And then also now to cohere towards collaboration, where we can see where other people are doing similar types of things that we didn't even know existed, and we can work together, or where there are organizations there that we can help provide a resource that they're missing, or that they can help us in some ways.
That's really good. You touched on some of the data governance mechanisms and verifiability. One key question that people often have when we move to more decentralized systems is how do we govern this whole environment overall? What are some of the mechanisms, and just prompting you towards the potential for DAO systems could play in this world of decentralized participation and collaboration?
Thanks. So this is super key. It's a little bit of an abstract concept for a lot of people who haven't heard of this concept called the DAO. It's an acronym for Decentralized Autonomous Organizations. And the idea here is that you have a community-driven model towards governance so that people in this context can actually identify, here are the standards and the protocols for data governance and data stewardship. This is what we're going to agree qualifies the type of data that we want to be brought in, how it's going to be brought in, who's going to have access, et cetera. And so it's something that protects each organization to say you still own your data. So you have data sovereignty, but you're now able to help to share that data with certain other parties in certain specific ways that are going to be helpful to them as well. So you are now protected in the security of your data, but now you're enabled and empowered to have access to other people's data and to also contribute to sharing that way too. And so this is a framework that is still evolving. And so there are interesting frameworks like MCP, Model Context Protocols, which allow domain experts in working groups then to actually help to create even what we might frame as like a discipleship framework for how AI can then be used, because we're creating the parameters now for how we are training these models, but also informing them to be able to adhere to what a community or coalition might identify as the standards for how we are going to engage around this.
Yeah, I just wanted to add something to that. Talking about governance and DAOs and what I was talking about with theological fidelity, one of the opportunities, and there are other nonprofits talking about this, is how do you secure the future of your organization? Right now that's done at the board level, at the president level, and you put all of these things in place for succession planning. But what this technology allows is actually to put that governance and that community and this idea more back in the power of the donors, actually. And so you could actually have nonprofit organizations, parachurch organizations becoming DAOs, so that that's a way to protect the founding principles of the organization. There's ways that we could talk about that this is automated. So the encouraging thing is that there are other nonprofits and ministries actively having this conversation. And so if that's interesting, we can introduce you to those orgs that are thinking through this. So, yeah.
That's really great. One of the questions I think people often pose as well when they hear the flurry of terminology that's associated with this space is things like trustlessness, which often carries this very instinctive negative connotation. But what you're talking about is creating a high watermark of trust. Can you unpack that concept of what trustlessness means in this context, and particularly the mechanism when we're talking about how Web3 provides for that? How is that actually facilitated in networks of people?
Sure. So part of the ethos of Web3 is that we are trying to decentralize towards having greater transparency or absolute transparency. And that transparency then lends itself to greater accountability. And from that accountability, we can operate with a real trust. I think in the kingdom, oftentimes we operate with a hope for, an implied, or assumed trust that we can trust each other because we are Christians, right? And unfortunately, that's not always happening. That actually breaks down trust, right? And so the idea of trustless systems kind of goes back to this mechanism as a good example of zero knowledge proofs, which is to say that I don't need to know you directly then to be able to have a trusted understanding of like this transaction is going to be executed to my understanding of those parameters, right? In a zero knowledge proof context, again, we provide enough of a transparent understanding of the provenance of certain artifacts, whether it's identity or whether it's data, to then be able to understand that the execution of this smart contract, which are sometimes basically the frameworks for how these transactions are coordinated between entities and individuals, then allows us to not have to know all the particulars of a person, but to understand that this transaction is going to be executed to those parameters with an understanding also that that person doesn't need a middleman, a validating party, because essentially they have been pre-validated by some of the network codifications, some of the ways that we have actually agreed upon, the ways that we're interacting with each other. And so we are known to each other, but we're not explicitly known in all of the identity artifacts. So it still preserves, a lot of the security and the privacy, while still allowing us to engage with each other frictionlessly.
Yeah, I think some of these concepts are hard to kind of grasp at first, but I really encourage everyone in this room to really lean into some of these principles, because I'm sure a lot of you, like I have been involved in conversations where we want to collaborate across our organizations and ministries. We want to share data. At the same time, we experience the tension of responsibilities to our organization or to the people that are represented by that data. And it becomes really difficult. But here's a solution where we can build on that authenticity, verification. We can keep control and ownership of where it resides, but also enable kind of permissions and sharing within that network. And it can create some really powerful solutions for things that have really been intractable challenges within all of our organizations for a really long time. I want to move our conversation up to another layer now. I know we've moved between a few different issues and contexts for where Web3 and AI intersect. This morning we heard James Poulter talk about agents. We heard agents yesterday as well, but we took it to another level this morning. John, I know you've been thinking through the implications of autonomous agents in terms of missions work, and how that relates potentially with Web3 tech. Can you share some of those thoughts with us?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Stu. So when I think about it, it's not if you're going to use AI, it's what kind of AI you're going to use to solve problems in the future as a tool in our toolkit. So when I think about AI agents, a lot of people, like when we're doing things at Gloo, we build things as co-pilots, or we can have something that's semi-autonomous, where we're training it with the rules by which it believes and follows to be a great assistant for whoever population it's talking to, with the end in mind to not replace the human, but to help the humans in ministries, in publishers, in anywhere to be able to access humans and access somebody to help them on that last mile of the journey in knowing God and knowing their purpose or achieving a goal. So that's what Gloo AI is all about. And what I would say is, so you could do that with a co-pilot where there's a human that's right next to an AI agent, and the AI agent is giving the human a deep understanding of whatever context they need to solve a problem for a person that they're encountering, whether that's knowing God or completing a course in leadership, or that's something that relates to a different use case. Now, the autonomous agent is something like a understanding of having an assistant, like I said, that's trained, and this could be somebody having a widget on a website that is not just a widget, but something super powerful where the assistant is able to take anybody that's incoming with a message to a ministry and be able to answer that question, direct them to the right person for follow-up, and then they're on their journey. So as I want to think about missions, they can be in the local context here, but we can also think about internationally what we can do. So in that domain, I would say that there's autonomous agents, and there's an autonomous agents alliance that's growing to be able to give good governance and good measure for keeping our data safe while achieving different goals. So I'll give you a very practical use case, and this is how Web3 and AI come together, which is when people are looking to do autonomous tasks, I would never think having personally identifiable information or your credit card or your bank account attached to your autonomous agent is a good idea, because if somebody hacks your agent and you're not guiding your agent or protecting through the best cybersecurity, right? You're sending your agent to go do a task or deliver on something. So I would suggest, and what we're finding through some research, is if you give your agent access to a crypto wallet, a digital currency, then when they encounter the need to be able to have a currency available to achieve one of their goals, they pull from that wallet. And it has a certain amount of the currency that you need to be able to get something done. And if it's hacked, then it's less identifiable back to the original source, in the sense that, you know, if this agent is going to be helping to share the gospel or help as a missions network to gather research on how people could be open to faith or open to God, that could also not necessarily be illegal, because you're helping the agent. The agent autonomously is finding out about a population and its cultural context, how to relate to those people. If it ever encounters paywalls or things it needs to do, and when it's gathering research, hopefully it's able to use some of its crypto, transact and arbitrage into a local currency, and then use that to be able to access the resources it needs. So, and then report back on all of its findings to the mission organization, which, by the way, could be a DAO, a decentralized autonomous organization, that then hears back on that smart contract, that programmed code. This is what the agent was sent to do. Here's the money it had. Here's what it achieved. And let's take a decision based off of that result. All of that while protecting the identities of some of the people that are doing that mission to share the gospel. And all of that, hopefully, in this big example I set up, completely legal at the same time.
That's important. You touched on agents. You talked about the autonomous nature of the way agents fundamentally operate. We're talking about generative AI creating various permutations of content. I just want to connect that with your earlier thoughts about the importance of being able to verify what's true and real in a world where content is being generated so quickly and autonomously on our behalf in ways that are indistinguishable for everyone out there in the world.
Yeah, I will say we're covering an incredible amount of ground here and introducing probably new concepts. But if that intimidates you, I would just encourage you to talk to us. There's others in the room. There's other people here. It has significant impact on gospel outreach, and Christians need to be in this space, because if it sounds crazy, like what you've heard at this event, and autonomous agents and agents talking to agents and automating everything, there's just fantastic opportunities for gospel outreach and uncensorable content distribution, and just amazing, opportunities that haven't existed before. So, yeah, it kind of goes back to just what I was talking about earlier in terms of how do you know what you can trust in terms of a digital space. And blockchain and the things that we've been talking about today is a critical element there. Did we have a conversation yesterday that is something you're looking specific for me to mention?
No, is this in terms of the verifiability aspect, when agents are able to make decisions,
Right.
create content, just reaffirming the importance of being able to know there's a verifiable record of what's real in a world where I'm constantly asking myself now, is this genuine? Is this the original? Is it authentic?
Yeah. So there's a couple examples. One, I'll use a secular example of political candidates. Another is Bible translation, or a translation of the Bible. And so in the case of a political candidate, they want to be public about all of their positions on a particular topic, or things they said publicly, or things they believe. And so if they published all of that publicly, which they already do, and they publish that on a trusted ledger, people would know that there's a source of truth where if somebody takes something out of context, you could immediately validate that this was taken out of context.
Yeah.
So you've probably seen on Twitter, if somebody says something, it's like, this is an ad, or it needs this context, and you shouldn't trust this. That sometimes takes a long time. That can be automated with this technology. In the other case is Bible translation. And so I don't want to go too far down this rabbit hole, but the ability with AI to use public domain content, so take a Bible translation, you can create your own version of a translation pretty easily within 30 minutes, and these tools will become more and more popular. So you can create your own family translation edition, and it's customized to you. The problem is, if all of these translations are being created and made available digitally, how do you know what to trust? How do you know what the original source is? And so if you don't make that translation available as the trusted, authoritative source, what do people have to go to know that they're reading the original translation and it hasn't been modified for a particular ideology, worldview, more gender-friendly, So that's why I think it's critical
That's really good.
to use this tech to be able to validate that. So.
That's great. We have come on time. Thank you, John Cobb, John Kim, John Knox, and Mark Finzel. It's the John panel today. It is lunchtime. If you have any questions about this really interesting topic of AI and Web3, seek out these guys. They're experts in their field, and they can help guide you through that process. Thank you very much.